Welcome to the HC Leadership Podcast, Forged in Fire, Led with Purpose, formerly known as the Heat of Command. We're here to explore what it takes to lead courageously authentic. From the fireground, battlefield, ballfield, classroom, or boardroom, we bring you real conversations to inspire, challenge, and drive change. Here are your hosts, Kyle Matusik and me, Kerry Henderson. Welcome back, faithful listeners. And you are used to hearing us say, welcome to another episode of the Heat of Command podcast, but we want to welcome you to the very first episode of the HC Leadership Podcast. It is finally out there that we have kind of come to a rebrand. We are extremely grateful for our listeners that have stuck with us through many, many episodes and several years of the Heat of Command podcast and stuck with us and supported us through all of our growth and the learning that we have done in this podcast. But what we have realized time and time again, in episode after episode and conversation after conversation with all of you out there and between Kyle and I, it all boils down to leadership in every industry. Leadership in every industry, it is basically about the same principles. And it's the principles that Kyle and I love to talk about and get so passionate about. And so we really wanted to branch out and not exclude anybody else. We have a lot of new listeners here that are from other industries, not just the fire service. And we are so blessed that you tune in and listen to us, even though we have pretty much stuck to fire service, fireground leadership within the walls of the firehouse, which is our backgrounds and very near and dear to our heart. And we have been very blessed in both of our careers, but we want to really expand, and not just for our listeners, but for us too, so we can bring in some more guests from every walk of life. We hope in these next seasons of the podcast that we will talk to military leaders, sports and youth coaches, pastors, executives that lead stressful boardrooms, and CEOs and artists, anything, because leadership boils down to what we talk about all the time, and that's that authenticity and humility and breaking down yourself and the growth that you put into it. And so we're just really excited about HC Leadership Podcast and where it can go from here.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time. We've been going at this 3 years and the growth is awesome. And, it's about challenging ourselves, like Kerry said as well, to go into some uncomfortable environments and scenarios, stuff we're not completely used to. But we think that the things we talk about matter way beyond those four walls of the firehouse. So it's an exciting opportunity for us. And it's just been great to get to talk to so many people. And we just want to expand that reach. I mean, who doesn't? And when we get feedback the way we did and the growth that we do, it's like this is our time to kind of take that step forward and see what happens, test the waters, put yourself out there, Yeah, I want to talk about our, so it's going to be HC Leadership Podcast, and we have a tagline, Forged in Fire, Led with Purpose. We never want to forget our roots, where we started, hence why we stay with HC, to keep our listeners coming back and keep on coming back. But that Forged in Fire and Led with Purpose, we talked a lot about in the past, and we'll continue to talk about all the time, how, I generally think that, some of the great leaders, you look at their past and you look at the things that they have gone through and how they forged through so many trials, and how struggle and uncomfortableness really builds a human being. And we're going to dive deep into that kind of stuff, because that stuff matters. Just a promotion doesn't make you a leader, or just a spot in a hierarchy of a corporation does not automatically make you a leader. And, that's so cliche, and we say it all the time. Titles are not leadership. But then how we get forged in that fire, and then to lead with purpose and who we really are and who we're really becoming, I think is so vital to extraordinary leadership. And, all too often in our world today, it just goes such the other way. And we just got to right that ship, get everybody back on track, and hopefully just continue to spread a good message, a positive message, a tough message, have the hard conversations, that the things people need to hear and what we think they need to do to be effective leaders. So it's an exciting time. And that's kind of where I connect with this whole rebrand. That Forged in Fire, Led with Purpose just really meant a lot to me, and to put that in there. And it's just kind of the journey I'm on, and it's kind of cool to to put it in writing and do something like this that exemplifies the things that me and you have been through, Carrie.
Yeah, I think it should be the journey every good
Yeah.
leader is
Yep.
on, that and every human being should be on, is that constant self-reflection and, am I doing the right thing, and am I doing what I was created to do? And the conversations that Kyle and I have, it's the same host, the same passion, it's just a bigger conversation in a bigger, kind of a bigger fishbowl. I think of it that way, and we really want to hear stories from other leaders in every industry about how they're growing and the struggles they've had, and what has that done for their leadership potential, and the bad too, the things that have gone terribly wrong, and what have they done to overcome that. And if you look at our new logo, the phoenix, you know rising from the ashes, and that's kind of how Kyle and I feel about our stories and the stories of so many of you out there. And I love that new logo. I think it's just beautiful. And I saw a meme today, and I should have saved it. It was basically like, I'm like the phoenix, but I'm like the phoenix that tripped over the extension cord, hurt my shoulder, and then stumbled as I stood up, but here I am. So
That's so
it's not
awesome.
pretty every time, but we keep trying, right?
Yeah. So, without further ado, we're going to dive right into this thing and get going, which is really exciting. And for all our new listeners, and as we branch out of the fire service, we're going to go deeper than those tactics and strategies that we used to talk about, Carrie. And I think this is an awesome place to start because we've had this conversation numerous times, and we've had it comparatively within the four walls of the firehouse, but things are different now, and we're going to talk about your authentic self. I think one of the cool things as we continue down this, we can repeat some topics as we go because the growth that I believe me and you get through this as well is awesome, and we get new insights and new ways to look at things. And we continue our research to bring new ideas, even with the same topics. When we've talked about our authentic self numerous times, but why it matters so much in leadership. And this has really been on my heart lately. When we look at that word authenticity and authentic self, what does that mean? And if you've read any Carl Jung stuff, he was psychoanalyst and psychotherapist, and he talked about that true self and persona, like who you really are versus that mask that everybody wears that the world sees. And I think that's just so true in so many walks of life. And it's breaking away from and being proud of what's under that mask and giving that to the world, and to break yourself down. We had a chat right before we started recording, and we talk about this all the time, how I just got to hit the record button when we're chatting because some of that stuff is just awesome, awesome material. But when we look at that and how to really tear yourself down to find out who you really are, like we can say this stuff in words on this podcast, but the work that it takes is probably some of the hardest work that you would ever do in your life. When I look back at that word authenticity and I look at like my personal and professional life and moments where maybe I was not my authentic self. And now, middle age and looking back, I could see so many times to where my previous career in the, especially in the military, that defines you. That's who you are. And that's how you react to the world. And it's like, man, that wasn't even who I am. Like that wasn't me. That was just the uniform I was wearing, what I thought I was supposed to be doing, what the culture told me to be doing. And man, did I fail so many ways, so many ways. And, you look back and you're like, if I would have done things different, if I would have looked at things, and now at this age, you get to analyze where you failed, where you lacked, and how you just showed up in this inauthentic self and you just portrayed this persona. So when you take it into your own life, your workplace, I think, and we could talk about men and females, but I think men particularly have really struggle with tying their job and their profession to their identity. And that just puts a mask on right away, and they don't bring their authentic self to the table. And my biggest point with all that, like if you are not your authentic self, your truest self, there is no way you can be an effective leader. And I will stand on that and have that conversation all day long, So it's just one of those things to kind of look at and how we can dig deeper and deeper into this I thought of authenticity and your true self.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and thinking back to younger Kerry days and younger Kerry in the fire service days, and I really wanted this job to be my identity. Like, I was so worried about what other people thought of me up until very recently. Like, even still so, that is
Mhm.
one of my biggest downfalls is really worrying about what people think of me and think of my decisions and but younger Carrie was so and I don't know if it's because I was a woman and insecure in the fire service because I was a woman or what it was. Because I was not doing the kind of self-reflection that I do now, right? So I didn't know myself very well. And when you're young, it somebody really has to teach you how to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
I was just showing up every day, kinda winging it, right? And
Yeah.
there's so much you're
Yeah.
learning too, right? So sometimes this is back burner stuff because 'cause you're learning all the
Mhm.
other, you know, tactic kinda things, right? Skill things. But, I was just so worried about what people thought of me, and that took away so much, happiness, right, and enjoyment in life, and it caused so much stress for me, but it just took away from my authenticity, and I didn't know how to show up as Carrie
Yeah.
because I was so afraid to show up as her and not be liked or not be respected or not be whatever it was that I was worried about, and I don't even know what I was really honestly worried about,
Right.
but I just was worried about it,
Yeah.
and so I
Yeah.
just, was trying on all these different things, and it just I was always a little bit, unsure of myself and awkward and because I was just trying to be someone else or maybe just trying to figure out who I was.
Yeah.
And the older I've gotten and the more you and I have chatted on here and the more people I've talked to and the more therapy I've done and the more I've gotten into my Bible, it just changes everything for me. And I feel better showing up in places where I'm not liked and I'm okay with it. And it's that's okay, and that's how it's intended. If everyone liked you,
Yeah.
that's not how the world was created.
Yeah, it's just, I that wearing that mask and, you go so long of your life wearing that mask, and then one day you're like, "Okay, enough," right? And I think there's just so many people out there that will wear that mask until they're not here anymore because, like, th to really break down and to break yourself down, right? You have to destroy everything that you ever thought. And this could go numerous ways in this conversation of how to do that. There's a strong biblical way of doing that and religion and spirituality. There's the psychology route, right? There's having mentors and things of that nature. But it's really having those deep reflective questions of what have I done in the past that I just did because I thought it was supposed to be that way, or I did it because I wanted to be liked, or I did it for all these reasons. And when we look back at ourselves and consider ourselves today, it's like, who are you? Take away every title, everything. If you go ask somebody who you are, they're going to start with their job most of the time, right? Most of the time, most people, that's what they're going to say. And it's like, no, you're more than that. What you bring to the world. I truly believe every person in this world has an innate ability that they were brought here for and to provide to this world, but we just crush it. And we silence that at such an early age due to numerous things. And that's a whole different thing. So it's getting back there and think back to your childhood. What were things you've always wanted to do? And why didn't you do them? Because, hey, yeah, I always wanted to be a skateboarder or one of those trick rollerblader dudes. I ain't going to go do that now. But it's like, what about that? And why didn't I do it? And that starts giving you these questions and these answers to these questions. And when you take this road of a deep self-reflection, and in the past we talked a lot about this, and you hit right on it as, people are going to stop liking you, and your world is going to, as you know it, if you truly go down this road, is going to just like somebody threw a stick of dynamite and blew it up. Relationships change because you're going to start going down a path that people aren't going to understand. And therein lies a challenge. So that's number one, because sometimes you're going to over-explain yourself and people are never going to get you. And so they're just going to leave because they don't want any part of that. They don't like the changes. And then it's this sense of loneliness, which again, you brought up. And it's like, Whew. This is, you're middle aged, things, you're all these friends and colleagues, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, this is lonely. You're in this area by yourself, and this is where strong leaders are born. This is the area where it all comes, where those values start sneaking in, the things that are so important to you, and you start really living the way you were always meant to live, and bringing those strengths to the forefront, and being that piece of the puzzle that you were always meant to be. But the work is multi-years, and there's ups and downs and there's challenges. And I think the biggest challenge for me has been the loneliness, right? You just feel so alone sometimes because hey, it's hard to explain to people. I could explain it to you, and maybe that's why this podcast is so awesome. It's like our therapy session, right?
Oh, 100%.
I could explain myself to camera, and either you get it or you don't get it. I don't know. I hope you do.
Yeah.
And I think as we continue on this, 25, 26 season, hopefully I would love to, dig and pull some guests to where we can really dive deep into this self-reflection and what that really entails, and why, and I think we've already explained why that's so important to effective leadership, because that's what people need, and they need to see it in every walk of life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, for me, a lot of times when I'm I'm constantly thinking about, not constantly, but, I'm thinking about authenticity and that we're preaching that and that am I living that, right? Am
Hmm.
I showing up
Oh yeah.
authentically? It's changed. Who I show up as now is different than obviously who I showed up before.
Yep.
Even in the last few years, I've gotten older and, maybe grouchier, but not really, but maybe a little bit. But, I'm always thinking about like I get I watch people say words
Yeah.
and they
I know where you're going.
say these words with the best of intention because that's how they want to act. And so they say that they do these things and they say all these words, but their actions don't align. And so a lot of people want to lead through humility and they want to lead through grace and compassion and support mental health and support all these things. And then they turn around and do the complete opposite because historically, that's how they've been. And it's so hard to come to the other side and to align those words and those actions. I do it myself and I have to catch myself because it's like historically we have judged or viewed or handled something in this way. But on this podcast, I would say I would handle it differently. So I have to make sure constantly, like, are my words and my actions aligned? Because for me, authenticity is that. It is that, and everyone nowadays, I think 99% of people wanna treat people with empathy and compassion and be genuine and authentic and be humble and all of those things, and the words and the actions don't line up, and so, like, no, you're you're not doing what you say you're doing, and I see it in interviews so many times, and that's why I think it is so important, and this is an action item for our listeners, is when you're interviewing to hire somebody or you're interviewing people to promote people, you have to be willing to really dig down into those interview questions, and if you work for a department that doesn't let you ask follow-up questions, I feel sorry for you because people will BS you and tell you exactly what you want to hear because they think that's what they would do. But I've seen it time and time again where people say in an interview, like, how would you handle this situation? And they give you this perfect, beautiful answer because they know how you want them to handle it. But how would they really handle it? So you really have to ask questions about how they've handled things in the past. How have they truly handled things? And then ask questions until you get the real side of somebody, to come forward. Because people, if you ask enough, you ask in the right way, people will tell you all about themselves. And that's you want to be hiring and promoting people into a culture of genuine, authentic, diverse, we can't all say the same things and do the same things, there's no growth there. And if you want a culture of true, compassionate, authentic, genuine people, you have to ask the right questions in those spaces. Whew, that was a rant.
That was a good one. It's there's so much to be said for that because as we progress in our world and our society and just the growth and just where we've come, I feel like it is more and more of I'm going to say this, but my actions don't meet that, and that's everywhere, I'm with you. You right, and that was me, hands down, and in certain industries, right, things are looked at as the core leadership roles, so for the firehouse might be, pride and loyalty and all these things and brother sisterhood, and we've had that conversation before. But then you go back and look and it's like, how did you exemplify those things? And the people that use the terms, and you think you're this kind of leader, A, B, and C, like, how do you show those things? And that's where real reflection comes in. And if you have somebody to do that with where they can be honest with you and you're not going to get defensive, that is even better because that is where, like, wow, you can scale mountains if you have that type of relationship to where you're not going to get defensive, but hear the real truth, right? What you really come off as versus what you think you do, because your personality and who you are isn't really what you think. It's what everybody else thinks. And if those two are different, you are not authentic. Right? You're living with a mask on, you're saying one thing and doing another. And like, go have those conversations with people and the people who are below you in your organizations and corporations. Like, go have those conversations. If you talk about being humble and showing humility, like, there you go. That's how you do it. But that is a scary, and I'm not saying that's easy. That is a very scary place, and Kerry, you talked about, as we continue through this journey, right? It is not a clean, like, straight up and we're good and we keep learning and progressing and all this stuff. Yeah, we keep learning, but man, it could be 10 steps up and then 5 steps back. And, just like you said, I still make mistakes today. You still fall into old habits sometimes because they're comfortable. They're comfortable. And that's, I think, another hard part as you break yourself down and you're going through these changes and you make some progress and then you go backwards. All those people around you are going to point that finger as soon as you take a step backwards and it's not this new way you want to live, but they don't see the full picture. So it's like, how do you create that inner motivation to keep going? Again, all these things are extremely challenging to do. So therein lies a challenge. You are going to make mistakes as you go. And trust me, it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. But I hope one day it's going to be worth it. I'm like still in the middle, right? Like, there's no huge redemptive story yet. It's still learning and growing. But the more I do this and go down this road, the more I realize. And when we talk about leadership, this is it. This is the key. I mean, there is so much out there on leadership and so much about traits and stuff. But if you, and we've talked about, if you read a book and become that book, that's not authentic, right? Who are you? Who are you behind everything else? I think is the biggest thing. And man, those points you hit on, man, you touch my heart, Kerry. Like, that is a big one. And again, guilty as charged. Like, I that was me saying one thing, doing another, not realizing it. I thought I was doing everything right. Right? Because that's what my culture told me. That's what my environment told me. But it was so, so wrong.
Yeah, and I think another teaching point here that's important to bring up is, we're really harping on your growth and your change and being willing to sit in it even when it's tough and even when people are, have negative responses to it. But it's also very important that if you have someone in your life in any industry, in your military unit, if you're a teacher at school, you're a principal, you're s- you're the coach of a sports team and you're listening to this and you've got people that are working with you that are trying to grow and are trying to go through this process, you have got to give them some grace because we are so quick to go, whoa, who are you? That's not you. Why are you showing up this way now when you've always been, and then we like to say old Kyle, and now
Yeah.
you're new Kyle? Like, that will throw people for a loop. And If you're not willing to give someone the grace to change and grow, that's you need some self-reflection there. So I think the teaching point here is also, if you're surrounding yourself with people who are growing and changing and asking for some space to do that, please support them through that. If people are asking for feedback and, criticism and, tell me how it really is, please use some emotional intelligence and give it to them in a way that they can receive it. Because I know for me, I'm quick to get defensive if somebody approaches me in a way that I'm not ready to hear it, right? So think about it when somebody comes to you and says, I want feedback on this or whatever it is about themselves, or how do you see me, or what could I do better, or whatever. Think about how you deliver that, and give people grace when they're growing and changing, and support them through it.
Yeah, you hit on, confronting. Carl Jung talks a lot about confronting the shadow, right? So it's acknowledging your fears, your weaknesses, and your blind spots. And I think you just hit on a key blind spot on your defensiveness, right? And I think a lot of that's maybe not a blind spot for a lot of people, or if you don't realize you get defensive, then it's absolutely a blind spot. So what are those for you? As you go down this, and can you acknowledge your fears? Can you acknowledge your weaknesses? And what are your blind spots? And I think as we move up in life, as we get older, as we move up the ladder, the corporate ladder, the industry ladder, whatever, wherever you find yourself as you move up with whatever you're in, I think sometimes these questions become more and more like important for you to be answering. Maybe that's the whole trick to life as we grow, right? We're so immature in so many parts of our lives where we just can't. I mean, could you imagine me and you having this conversation at 22 years old? I
No,
like
it
to
would have been silly.
be like, really, dude? No, not at all. Can we get this to our,
Oh,
the
but
the, the
can
youth?
pause, and I
Go.
will say the 22-year-olds of today are different than the 22-year-olds of
Agreed.
when I was 22.
In
I
many
think
ways.
in many ways, and
Yeah.
I think in a good way, there's so much more self-reflection and emotional intelligence going on than there was, and there's a whole lot more importance placed on better things
Hmm.
and important things. So I think those folks, the younger folks, some of them may be listening to us and go, "Yeah, I mean, I'm not. This career is not my whole life. I have all these other things going on for me." But I still think this is extremely relevant topic. But I wanted to pause and throw that in there. That if you're 22 and you're hearing this, you may be well on your way past where I
Yeah.
was.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're right. The strengths and weaknesses have totally flipped, right? In the generational stuff, and it's just so interesting to see. And I think in the workplace, and again, industry wide, corporate world, wherever, I think we're at such an opportunity right now because I just don't feel the fire service is it or the military is it, but there are so many young people, and this is really where we can have the greatest impact as you're going through this journey. Like you can start sharing with them the struggles, like do it younger because at 40 it sucks, dude. Right? You got kids, you got life, you got all this other stuff. And it's like you're trying to figure it all out again. And it's like, wait a second, what happened? And it's easier just to go back, put that mask on and live life that way, right? That's generally pretty easy. And you could get pretty far that way. Like I'm not taking anything away from that. Like you probably can. And a lot of people do. So that's cool, right? And sometimes that is so inviting to just put that mask back on and just keep grinding away through life, and you're gonna be generally okay, and it's gonna be easy. But man, you are, everybody listening, you got so much more to offer, and you just have so much more than that. What's behind that, you got to take that mask off, and these are. I'm self talking right now, like this is what I got to tell myself, right? But it's so true, it's that way of the world looks so easy, but when we still really start looking within our deep self, man, it's challenging, real challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. So I read a quote, says true authenticity comes from the courage to dismantle your own ego
Yeah,
and rebuild with honesty, humility, and consistency.
yeah,
And I think that's a big word there, is the
so
consistently
good.
and consistently showing up that way. The strongest leaders aren't the ones who never break. They're the ones who grow stronger because they've been broken
And, I love that word broken. Like, don't kid yourself. We're all broken people at some point or another. Like, somewhere along that line, is something has happened somewhere, and that's okay. But it's so true. It's so true for me, as we, dive into leadership and really examine it, this is it. This is it. Like, as we continue on HC Leadership Podcast, like, this is the episode to keep going back to. Like, this is where you need to go. Like, if you're listening, this is your sign. Like, start the work on you.
Yeah, and I can't wait, as this continues to hear from people in every job place and the struggles and the beauty and all the things, and to get them on here and talk about like what what broke you, or what did you go through to break down and build back up, or what are your failures and what are your struggles and what are your successes.
Yeah.
And I just can't wait to hear from people from everywhere.
I think the real cool thing about that kind of conversation, I look forward to it just like you. I think instead of, when we have those conversations, like, the leadership traits are just automatically going to come out. Like, we're not going to sit here and be like, all right, this is what we're going to talk about leadership today. We're just going to talk about the stories. And then you're going to see those traits just surface. And I think that is just so cool. Because that's the realness. Like, that is it. That is what it's all about.
Definitely so excited, and please stick with us. And we're excited that our previous listeners have stuck with us through this time of change for us, and we can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, we got a big 2026 starting to gear up and get scheduled, so that'll be really exciting. So stay tuned to all our socials, subscribe, share with a friend if you thought this was interesting. Talk to us, let us know. And, thanks for listening to our very first rebrand of the HC Leadership Podcast, where we're forged in fire and led with purpose. Leadership starts with you, your values, your authenticity, your true self. Take that mask off, strip it away. Face the hard truths and lead from authenticity. That's where the real impact begins. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to the HC Leadership Podcast. Leadership isn't rank or title, it's how you show up. So go look in the mirror. Are you leading with purpose today? Keep reflecting, keep leading. Until next time.